I know it's pretty late to be making this video, but okay, actually I have no excuse. I just suddenly wanted to make it because I have so much to say about Secret of the Mimic that I can't shove into a lore video, and even how it shifted my opinions on pretty much every other Five Nights at Freddy's game. I also want to share my thoughts because despite me feeling very strongly towards this game in a certain way, I actually find myself disagreeing with a ton of statements made by people who feel the same way as me, which I find really weird. I'm gonna be using my rating system from my old ranking video, except I'll go way more in depth since I'm only talking about this one game. That means that the game can get at maximum 10 points. 7 of these are for gameplay, because if I'm playing a game, then by far the most important thing is that I enjoy the act of playing said game. 2 points go to story, because this is Five Nights at Freddy's, so of course the story plays a part. And finally, 1 point goes to atmosphere, because as I said in the old video, atmosphere can really help carry a horror game. I'm generally going to be talking about these 3 aspects separately from each other, but occasionally I'll have to break from that format because obviously the 3 aspects are intertwined with each other at all times. Now, I have a lot to say, to the point that this may as well be a retroactive Let's Play, so let's jump right into part 1, the gameplay. Before I even start a game, I always go into the settings. In the case of first-person games, it's especially important, because I get motion sick really easily. The more accessibility features for this, the better. I greatly appreciated the option to turn head bobbing off, but I wish there was a field of view slider. I had to play the game in a window significantly smaller than my screen so that I wouldn't get sick.
Hey buddy, this is Dispatch with Fazbear Entertainment. How are you feeling?
Right off the bat, it was cool to get another outdoor section in a FNAF game. Outside of Fall Fest, we never get to see that. For once, we're reminded that there's a world outside of these dangerous facilities, and we're choosing to leave the comfort of them. This is a really small nitpick, but it annoyed me that even though I went into the settings to make sure I could use the arrow keys for movement, because I use my left hand for the mouse, I could still only use A and D to steer the car left and right.
Oh, they just gave it away!
And apparently you can also use these buttons to lean when you're in the locker. I didn't even know that until my final playthroughs that I did to get all this footage. Once we switch to free roam, we immediately encounter my first non-nitpicky issue with the game. The cursor thingy. Whatever you call this little dot at the center. Okay, well, I just looked it up and apparently it's called a crosshair. This complaint might sound like a nitpick, especially since the same issue is in every other Steel Wool game, but it's really not. Most of the time, I couldn't see it, and this caused a lot of issues interacting with objects. Once I got to the first keypad section, I actually took a little piece of clay and stuck it onto the center of the screen so that I could see which button I was pressing, and now I just stick that up on the screen every time I play. I know a more visible crosshair would be annoying for people who can already see the one that's there, but I wish there were several you could choose from in the settings. My ideal version would be one that's a black dot with a white circle around it, so it's clearly visible regardless of whether you're looking at something bright or dark. Maybe there could even be a key to switch it on and off, so it's only there when you need it. The rest of the UI is nice though. I appreciate how they put the instruction cards in the environment, instead of pausing the game and making you hold E for longer than it takes to even read the instruction. Same with how you have to physically interact with everything instead of just holding down a button. It makes simple actions like opening the gift boxes a lot more entertaining. I hope this continues in future games and isn't solely because of this specific game being made with VR in mind. I think it will continue though, because it never happened in the Help Wanted flat modes. Although I will say, there's room for improvement with the posing of the hands and arms.
This client tour will show you just what I'm capable of. Get ready to be amazed.
Having a lot of segments of the game vaguely tied together as what were once parts of a client tour was a nice touch. It makes the whole thing feel like an experience, if that makes sense. It's not just a journey through a bunch of disjointed areas with no rhyme or reason like Security Breach. The welcome show in particular was the perfect way to introduce the game's setting. We get to see what these characters are supposed to be like, and just before we can get too comfortable, it all shuts down and we're left with creepy, lifeless characters in the dark. It reminds me a lot of something Scott said all the way back when he made the first game. That's one of the things that makes these creatures so scary in real life. If you've ever been to an animatronic show at a theme park or restaurant, they can be creepy when they move, sure. But it's when they're turned off that the veil is lifted, and you realize that they were never alive. They are, and always have been, dead. I think that idea kinda got sidelined by the time we got to maybe Sister Location or Pizzeria Simulator, and then was completely abandoned in Security Breach. So it was great to already see it come back right at the start, and in such an upfront way.
It's very important that you update the data diver whenever you find an access station. This is not optional.
When I first heard Dispatch say upgrading the data diver wasn't optional, I thought to myself, there must be a secret ending for people who find a way around getting the upgrades. I was immediately proven wrong when I discovered you can't open the door right behind you without getting an upgrade. I think the data diver puzzles are pretty neat. I actually wish we got more than just 6 of them, so that they could have gotten more complex. The only problem I have is that you can't switch the lane while the cursor is at the edge of the screen, so you have to just spam the button before it starts moving again to make sure it moves to the lane you want in time. As for the upgrades themselves, I like that they're basically the security pass system from Security Breach, except good. Come to think of it, the description, that thing from Security Breach except good, is probably going to come up a lot in this video. Instead of going up to a door and having a message pop up on your screen saying what security level it requires, you can see an in-universe label on the door. It also creates a lot of really tense situations where you have to unlock the door the first time you use it. It only takes about 2 seconds, but it feels like an eternity when something's chasing you. And if you run to a door to escape something but you don't have the upgrade, then it's your own fault for not looking at the symbol. You don't have to walk right up to the door to find out if you can enter it yet.
But in the meantime, just try to be quiet, careful, and focused on the task at hand.
At first, I was really frustrated with the controls for the power puzzle, but by the end of the game, I loved them. I actually wish there was a game that was made of just these little puzzles. It would be a great time waster mobile game type of thing. Okay, so while making this video, I discovered there is a similar game online called Pipes, and I have been using it as a time waster. I loved the detail of the dead employee in the suit here, and the elephant scare was a good idea, but it doesn't work if you don't look at it closely enough. If he's only in your peripheral vision, then you just hear a scare chord out of nowhere, which I noticed happened to several YouTubers. Still, when it does work, I really like it. It reminds me a lot of Bonnie and Chica appearing at the doors in FNAF 1. A lot of the designs here actually creep me out in the same way as the first few games. That old-fashioned, uncanny valley feel was gradually lost over the years, so I was glad to see this game bring it back for most of the mascot suits. I think the elephant encounter was a solid introduction to the game's main mechanics. From what I can tell, the character in this area is programmed to be easier than the normal Mimic AI, so it lets you off the hook a lot more and gives you a chance to traverse to the mice, cutouts, and lockers, so you can learn how to use them in a more pressing situation later on. I don't know if this was intentional, but it's nice that if you're a returning player who doesn't need this tutorial, you can just skip it by crouching behind him at the start. Oh yeah, and his jump scare noise is really funny. I never saw this happen to anyone else, but almost every time I entered this room, this one area took a while to load in, and if I walked over there I'd fall through the floor and into the void. It baffles me that they didn't design any failsafe to prevent you from falling out of the map. Actually, now that I think about it, there is a failsafe programmed into the game. When you fall down a hole in other sections, it leads to a game over screen. They just didn't add it in the case of clipping out of bounds. You'd think they'd at least do that with how often that issue came up in Security Breach. So you know how this was the segment of the game that was shown off in VR at PAX West? Well, if I were there, I would have taken that headset off the second Jackie popped out of her box. Okay, well, actually I would have taken it off the second I saw it was free roam because it would make me sick. But if that wasn't the case, it would have happened when I saw Jackie. I was fine with all the characters in Help Wanted 1 and 2, but this thing terrified me the first time I saw it. If I went into this game completely blind, I think Jackie's chase sequence would have given me a panic attack. The way you can see her arms jumping out from behind you, the way she appears right on top of you while you're slowly crawling under grates, and the way the game makes sure you have to nearly run right into her several times throughout the chase is all brilliant horror. It's way more effective than having the thing chasing you be fully behind you the whole time, especially when the monster looks as scary as this one. It's hard to pick a favorite part since it's all so tense, but if I had to pick one, I'd probably go with the crawling one. The shaking and loud metal sounds show you just how powerful this thing is, and it feels like she and the grates are about to fall down on you at any second, which, you know, they are. I wish Jackie had come back towards the end of the game like Big Top did. This was a really memorable section, sure, but I think she needed more screen time to be deserving of the amount of marketing she got.
Check the monitor. I'm sending you a camera feed.
It's a small thing, but I like how the security footage gives you hints throughout the game. The security breach cameras ended up being basically useless, so I don't think anyone would have really complained if they cut cameras from this game entirely, but instead they found a new use for them. Other than code solutions, I also remember the cameras showing the locations of the spring lock parts in the workshop, and the power puzzle pieces in the warehouse, and there are probably more examples I've forgotten or never even noticed. It's also fun how we end up back in the security office at the start of every hour. Well, except for 5 AM, but we still end up in a security office there. Lots of nice little ties to remind you that despite how different it all feels, it is still a Five Nights at Freddy's game. Why does it load like this?
And that was my patented Demotronic welcome show. Amazing, if I do say so myself.
The welcome lobby feels like the first true challenge of the game, forcing you to actually learn how to defend against the Mimic without training wheels. And it's the perfect room for such a thing. The sinking feeling you get when you enter this room for the first time and see mascot suits everywhere is perfect. And then when you die, you might think, oh well, at least now I know which suit he's in. And nope, it's random every time. That being said, I always skip this segment when I replay the game, except one of the times I screen recorded because, you know, I needed the footage. And also as an aside, the reason this footage here looks terrible is because it's from my first recorded playthrough where I didn't realize I was filming at 24 frames per second, not the second one where I got good footage while speedrunning the game and thus skipping this segment. Anyway, I'm not too big a fan of this type of gameplay style. You know, being stealthy with hiding spots and distractions to get around an area without a roaming threat noticing. So, whenever it shows up, I'm always trying to rush through it so I can get to what comes after it. Mainly, I don't like sitting around hiding for extended periods of time waiting for the chance to do the thing I need to do. And this segment led to me having to do that quite a lot. You'd think that there being 2 floors would make it easy to get the Mimic far away from me and give me time to do what I need to do. But getting him far away from me would usually just result in him respawning closer to me, like in direct line of sight of both me and the thing I need to get to. I think it would be a much better section if that didn't happen, especially considering this is only the second stealth segment in the game. I wouldn't call it bad though, it's just not for me. The elevator repair segments were a pleasant surprise. I like that they didn't do what Help Wanted 2 did, where they have you do a task and throw in an animatronic that gives you some second problem to deal with as a distraction, in order to try to make it scary. Here, the task itself is the scary thing, which is how it should be. It's like the animatronic repair levels from the first Help Wanted, except the punishment is being crushed by an elevator instead of maimed by an animatronic. I'm not sure which fate would be worse, to be honest. It was an incredibly simple segment, but that's okay because it returns later. I actually wish it had gotten a few more variations, though. Maybe not more elevator repair moments specifically, but, you know, other repair type things. Like, for example, one of those Captain Springlock lifts, or the trash melter thingy. I think we all expected a section like this going in. Steel Wool loves making these little carnival games, and they're a natural fit here. I wish we had gotten a third minigame type instead of 2 shooters, especially since we get a whole extended shooting section later in the game. The game files suggest there were going to be 2 others, Bonka Bunny and Mystic Hippo, but I guess either they ran out of time or they didn't want to rehash Help Wanted 2. The ones that made it into the game were decent enough for what they were, though. And I think the secret exit in the Clown Teeth minigame was really clever. I kinda wish it would have let you skip one of the 3 Big Top sections though, so that there would be a reward for finding this early on instead of coming back to it later. But I can't complain too much because the Big Top mechanic was pretty neat. It was kinda like the first-person horror equivalent of a precision platformer. This is a rare type of stealth I actually like, where you have to be careful with your movements because getting spotted is basically an insta-kill, and the difficulty is built around that. You have to take your time, sure, but you're not waiting around forever for RNG to decide that the mimic should go somewhere outside of your locker's line of sight. And this area had the best power puzzle segments of the game, since there was a looming threat that felt natural. You get to the puzzle area and think you're safe, and then you hear a heavy footstep and realize, oh god, that's right, he can come over here too. Big Top in this section has by far my favorite jump scare in the game. Most of the characters' jump scares do the bare minimum, just, you know, shaking the character in your face. But having Big Top shove you into his ticket booth thingy is genius. I wonder if this one was designed after they decided to delay the VR mode, since I don't see how it'll work there. While Jackie's chase was the scariest in the game for me, I think this one was the most fun and mechanically interesting. The other chases are generally just running from point A to point B, but this one has more going on than that. The chase constantly keeps you on your toes, blocking paths and tossing in obstacles to force you to change your route with hardly a moment's notice. It would probably be a lot easier for someone with basic directional awareness, but I kept getting lost during the first part, and so it was actually a challenge. My favorite part was when we're in the little crawl space and Big Top's hands come crashing down from above. Normally in a chase you'd be running as fast as possible, but here you're forced to slowly crawl around while threats are bursting in inches away from your face and reaching around for you. I like that the ending tied the mannequins back in too, and it's cool how Big Top will mistake them for you, pull them up, and then throw them back into your path. The first shot of him pulling a mannequin up helps demonstrate his strength, making him even more intimidating. I only have one complaint about this chase, and that's that it ends exactly the same way as the Jackie one, where we and the enemy both fall through a hole, we pass out, and then we wake up somewhere else. And it's not the last time that happens. The game has a real issue with transitions. Now it's time to collect the 8 pages, 5 Springlock suit pieces. My opinion on this section really varies between playthroughs. The first time I played it, the Mimic was constantly spotting me when I was crouching and clearly not within its line of sight, and it kept teleporting right in front of me and catching me before I even had a chance to react. But in most subsequent playthroughs, including the ones I recorded, the section was completely fair and thus much more enjoyable. I wish they had coded in something to prevent the Mimic from spawning literally right next to you to prevent these scenarios, or at least made it take a few more seconds for them to be able to spot you after waking up. That issue aside, the workshop is easily the best designed area for such a gameplay style. There's just the right balance between open space, fully concealing walls, and places you can crouch to hide behind. It's also just big enough that you can't cheese it by booking it to the exit, without being so big that you have to spend forever backtracking to where you entered. The openable shortcuts help a ton with that. Going the long way to get a piece and then coming back the short way to get a second piece is so satisfying, but it also comes with the risk of giving the Mimic a quicker way to get to you, and giving you less solid wall to hide behind. But, of course, that means a lot less when the Mimic can and will just spawn 2 inches away from you anyway. Although there was a bit of a learning curve, because after enough deaths I discovered that there are 2 specific areas you should try to avoid as much as possible. This stretch of hallway at the start, and this stairway at the back. If the Mimic spawns in the Jester at the top of the stairs, or the elephant or dog in the hallway, and you're right next to him, you're screwed because there's nowhere to duck for cover and you can't run out of his line of sight before he catches you. You wouldn't think it at first, but it's better to stay in the enclosed rooms with tons of costumes as often as you can. Something I don't think a lot of people really consciously acknowledge, but that I think was a nice touch, was the tutorial for finding missing pieces of the power puzzles here. There's an empty spot on the grid, and then right next to the machine in a small room you can't leave there's an extra piece. They even have a light pointing at it. I just know that if they didn't do this, some people would have been totally confused at what to do in the warehouse section. It might not seem like that due to hindsight bias, but it absolutely would have been the case. From what I remember, this room is also the start of the running joke of how we could easily get around a scenario if we could just jump slightly or push something away, but the game doesn't allow us to, which some people might find annoying, but I find it hysterical. Apart from that, this section was a nice little callback to the Glamrock Freddy mechanic, and that's about it. I think it probably should have been a bit later in the game though, so there wouldn't be a massive gap between this and the only other time we have to use this mechanic. The section after that had a good little tutorial for the hand cannon and the crane. Not much else to say there. It does what it needs to do.
What about the talent? Well, we removed the talent.
Through the 5 or so times I played this section, I never once died. But I think that's because I knew beforehand that the puppets couldn't actually kill you. If I didn't know that, I would have focused primarily on them thinking they'd be an insta-kill, which I think is very misleading game design. Also, every time I played this section, I felt like it went on for way too long without providing any engaging challenge. What I think they should have done here is added several checkpoints so they could ramp up the difficulty over time. I assume the reason it's super easy is so people don't have to keep playing through the whole thing over and over. It also probably would have helped if the show itself wasn't super boring.
About an IOE!
Boo! If they had more development time, they could have even made it randomized between different templates like how Edwin explains it. I guess it being boring is kind of the point though, since it's AI-generated slop in-universe. But surely they could have done something to make it less of a drag, especially upon replays.
Say hello, Nurse Dolly.
No.
Oh, that gets me every time.
Dolly's intro section was a nice change of pace. It felt almost like a first-person game of Frogger, trying to track her pattern and dodge and weave between safe spots. And Frogger is one of my favorite games, so obviously I enjoyed it. On a purely conceptual level, it's one of the most interesting and creative parts of the game. I really wish there had been a second, much bigger track section after this one. It felt like a tutorial for an area that never ended up existing. Now it's time to collect the 8 pages, 5 Springlock parts, 6 trash cubes. This was the least notable stealth segment, for better or for worse. It never got annoying, but it never got scary or challenging either. I tend to use the rat strategy to skip over it because it feels like a filler segment. The dolly doors could have been interesting, but not much was done with them. Like I said, I think they should have done more with Dolly's tracks instead of turning her into yet another free-roaming, noise-oriented enemy. The opening was a neat little puzzle though. I know I've made it pretty clear by now, but I like puzzles better than stealth, so despite being really simple, I thought this room was pretty fun. As for Dolly herself, I can't tell if she's supposed to be scary, cute, or annoying. At first, she's presented as a silly bird brain type, and I feel like she has an intentionally annoying voice.
You're not allowed that. You're not allowed that.
But I'm not sure why they'd do that. Maybe she was supposed to be something more light after Jackie and Big Top, or maybe they were banking on what she turned into next to be really shocking in comparison. Get it? Shocking. Like shock pads, because Dolly has...
You need a lobotomy.
I also have what's the opposite of a nitpick? A small praise? I have to give this section a small praise for adding hiding spots that aren't lockers. It's one of the only 2 areas to do that, and I don't know why. I would have been so hyped seeing Dolly climb out of that furnace if it hadn't been shown off in the promotional material. But I guess I can't hold that against the game itself, so I'll just pretend I was hyped. Oh my god, I never would have expected this. The chase had such a cool opening and by far the best chase track, but it ended up being painfully underwhelming. I think it was supposed to be a bait and switch since Dolly and the music track returned for the elevator segment, but still, there was so much wasted potential for a big chase through a series of conveyor belts topped molten metal. I do feel like I need to mention the strange noise bug. Sometimes the chase music will randomly start playing in the stealth part, and then it'll be playing twice when Dolly appears on top of the elevator. I got this bug in the first playthrough I recorded, and I quit the game before starting the elevator section so that I wouldn't be annoyed by the overlapping tracks.
So there is some good news.
One thing I really appreciate about the Dolly elevator segment is that when you get a game over, it's very communicative about why you did. If you take too long, Dolly kills you. If you mess up the instructions, the elevator falls. Compare this to something like Sister Location Night 4 where you're in the Springlock suit. If you let the Minarinas climb too high, the Minarinas kill you. If you let the Springlocks snap, the Minarinas kill you. In that scenario, there was no way to know what you did wrong, and thus what you needed to improve on. But in this one, they kept the elevator crashing scene when they could have just said, well, it's FNAF, so we need the jump scares, and replaced it with Dolly. And the one they went with was easily the better option. This is another section that didn't appeal to me. I like Chica's design, and her little dance is cute, but like I said before, I'm not a stealth fan, and there was nothing besides Chica herself to set this section apart from all the others like it. The area is really bland compared to everywhere else in the facility. Plus, despite Chica's design being cool, it's by far the least scary of the 5 main costumes, those being Jackie, Big Top, Dolly, Chica, and the prototype. There is one thing I liked, but I'm not sure if it's an actual thing that was programmed into the game or if it was all in my head. When I played, I felt like Chica was much less sensitive to the sound of my footsteps because of the music playing, but it was balanced out by her being faster than any other character. But again, that might just be how it coincidentally worked in my playthroughs. I don't know too much about the game's code or anything. As another plus, this was the section where I really started to see how well the backtracking works in this game. Unlike the Pizzaplex, where you'd have to run a marathon to get back to point A from point B, the map here is way more interconnected, letting the place still feel massive while being really easy to re-navigate. This was a nice break from the action. I've heard that it's supposedly way too loud, but I have a noise cap on my computer no matter what I'm doing because I have sensory issues, so if it was loud, I'd have no way of knowing. I wish the crane moved a bit faster, and that you could see the joystick better, but I still liked the section. It was cool to build my own little obstacle course and try to find the easiest setup to traverse. And if you want the extra challenge, you can go for the gift box, which of course I did because that's a requirement to get the third ending. I wonder which parade float is for which place. I mean, obviously the construction one is for the worker union and the American flag one is for the city, but which one is for Fazbear Entertainment and which one is for the nursery? Both of them seem to have jug band characters. I think most people agree that this is the worst section of the game, especially if you're trying to get all the mail instead of just looking up the door code online. I agreed too, until I learned a little trick. That's right, you can immediately lock Chica out of the whole area and do whatever you need. In the footage, I sprinted through because I just needed to get to the end, but in an earlier playthrough, I collected all the mail and got the cupcake collectible using this method. It's not even a cheat or a bug, so I feel no shame in doing it. This game has a feature that shouldn't exist anywhere, but was only an actual problem for me in this area. When you collect mail or insert an item into the inventory machine, the game doesn't save it. Normally that's not too much of a hassle, but in this area where there's like 10 mailboxes and a collectible, and no spots that trigger a save, and it's the hardest section of the entire game, that's a massive issue. Difficulty in a game is fine, but not tedious, arbitrary difficulty. It's like the video game equivalent of busy work. There's an easy solution to this. Just have a manual save option on the computers. These are usually in or next to areas that autosave the first time you enter them anyway, so it's not like it would allow people to cheese any sections of the game. It's a shame this section sucked so much too, because I feel like it was a cool idea. It just wasn't designed in a way that worked with the concept. Distractions are great when there are multiple routes to get to the same place, but in a linear section like this, they just make you hide in lockers over and over and over. Just as an aside, this bit at the very end of the section is the worst transition I've seen in my life, so, maybe I shouldn't have complained about the fades to black after the chases.
This isn't your average everyday darkness. This is advanced darkness.
I like how pretty much everyone's reaction to this section is, wait a minute, this is actually scary. The first of the 3 tiger areas is my least favorite. Not because the idea is the worst, but because it tends to break if you don't go in the order the game expects you to. If you don't get to the switch fast enough, the light above it will never come back on, and you'll be stuck running from light to light for eternity. It would actually be the best section if they fixed that, because when it works, it's so cool. It's an amazing example of simple but effective gameplay. You've got just a couple tiny, constantly shifting safe spots that can disappear from right under you, or from the one place you're trying to run to. You're in a constant state of having to choose to leave safety. It reminds me of FNAF 4, where you had to choose to keep running up to the darkness where the animatronics are coming from. This is veering into story territory a bit, but I feel like I need to mention it here. The fact that we have no idea what the white tiger actually is makes this section so much more unsettling. We know it can't be M2 because it keeps teleporting around. So is it David? Is it some sort of agony creature? The inability to define what it is makes it more unpredictable, and thus by extension scarier. And the sound design is so good here. The ambience, the distorted child lines, the thumping footsteps that warn you you're taking too long. It's all so well thought out. We rarely see the tiger actually moving, so the sounds force us to imagine where he is, and usually we're led to believe he could be anywhere, including right behind us. It's got that same feeling as the original Five Nights at Freddy's when a character suddenly disappears from the camera feed, and you start to panic with every little noise, because as far as you know, any one of them could be the animatronic you lost track of. One way that I think they tried and failed to capture the energy of that game, though, is the fading images of the tiger's face. I feel like they were going for the same vibe as the "It's Me" hallucinations, but each image stays on screen way too long to be effective. It needs to be a sudden flash, not a fade in and out. Another thing that I felt was really clever but easy to miss is the color choice. In the sections without the nightlight, the room has cold blue lighting, while the sections with it have a warm orange lighting, giving you a temporary sense of security. But then the second nightlight section proves that to be a false sense of security when the tiger starts teleporting right in front of you. When I saw the map of the maze area, I was surprised by how big it was. When you're in the maze, it feels so suffocating and claustrophobic, like you're in a little cramped box that could close in on you at any second. And the suits are so well positioned. Most of them you never see until you're right in front of them, and for a split second you'll panic thinking it's the tiger. And thankfully this tactic is used sparingly enough so that you don't get acclimated to it. And at the end of that long, winding, dreadful section, we get my favorite instance of my favorite joke. We had to go through this entire segment to get just about 10 feet from where we started. All because Arnold couldn't pull a few boards off a door frame. The achievement even adds to the joke by calling it a shortcut in quotes.
You made it the farthest, farther than I had expected.
The bad ending doesn't have any additional gameplay, so I'll save it for the story section and continue on the other route for now.
Or a bunny, running from danger, scared and stupid, searching for a hole to hide in.
I like how the Goodbye Show took the normally unremarkable mechanic of pulling levers and turned it into an actual challenge. It was a really short and easy challenge, but it's a really short and easy mechanic, so that's not much of an issue. For a moment, I questioned why they brought Big Top back here instead of Jackie, since she was the first boss, but then I remembered that the segment kinda required an enormous enemy.
Why'd you change your heart? Why don't you trust me?
Why didn't you trust me?
4 hours into the night, we finally see a Freddy Fazbear. This truly was a Five Nights at Freddy's. This area did an amazing job squeezing so much potential out of such a tiny space. I always thought anything free roam in the FNAF 1 building would be stupid because of how small it is, but I was proven wrong. Sure, it's only one segment, but it's a really good one. Everyone's already mentioned this, but it was such a cool idea to do a reverse FNAF 1 with us as the animatronic and the antagonist, well, secondary antagonist, as the security guard. I think this is my personal favorite of the stealth segments. The Mimic never teleports, and the fact that the area is so small means you're expected to rely on distractions and natural cover instead of waiting around in the lockers forever. Sure, there are a few lockers, but they're in places where the Mimic will usually exit its line of sight pretty quickly, granted you crouch immediately upon exiting. I do wish this one locker wasn't placed right next to a distraction, though. Now it's time to collect the 8 pages. 5 Springlock parts. 6 trash cubes. 5 film reels. Yeah, that's what it was, right? We're on that one. Even though I don't like these sections, I can appreciate that this one feels like a final test to see if you've mastered the mechanics. Hiding spaces are more sparse, there's a lot less cover to hide behind, wind-up mice are in short supply, and apart from the film room there are no doors to protect you. You can't consistently rely on one strategy to get through this one. You have to adapt to which tool is provided to you in the room you're in. For example, this room has a noisemaker and a vent, so if you're here and the Mimic is heading your way, your options are to either activate the noisemaker and book it to the vent so you can loop behind him, go through the vent without activating anything and crawl downstairs, or wait inside the vent and hope the Mimic leaves the area. If you've learned how the Mimic responds to actions, then you'll know which option you should choose depending on where you're trying to get. And if you don't, then you're finally gonna have to go through some trial and error with mechanics you haven't mastered yet. I actually wish there were sections before this that forced you to master each individual mechanic. I saw one guy play half the game without even discovering that the mice could be thrown. The closest thing I can think of to an area that asks you to master a mechanic is the admin wing with lockers, but it throws in lots of distractions too with all the cupcakes, so you can rely on those if you want to. I wish there were a few areas with no hiding spots so that you have to rely on distractions and avoiding line of sight. Fiznom's lockerless stream is a good example of how well this would work. I do have one massive complaint about this area though, the sound. This is the one and only issue that I can't believe they shipped the game with. There's no way Steel Wool could have possibly not noticed it, or not felt that it greatly detracted from the gameplay experience. This area had to have been rushed in order to meet the release date, there's no other explanation. Oh, and one smaller complaint I have is that I wish New Game Plus had an option to skip the contents of the tapes and jump right to the numbers. In a first playthrough, it makes perfect sense to force the player to watch all of them, because they provide important story context. But once you know what happens in them, it just slows you down. The final chase was good in terms of mechanics, since it forces you to constantly act on your toes, but I wish it had taken us through more of the facility. It could have been a big goodbye that reminds us of all the obstacles we've overcome, but instead it takes us through bland areas with nothing familiar. I liked the idea of the mimiclings, but I don't think this was the right time to feature them. It's supposed to be the dramatic final encounter with the mimic, but instead, these silly little guys show up out of nowhere, and they're the threat you're the most likely to die to. They really undercut the moment, in my opinion. I think that instead, the mimic should have been crawling through vents and around corners to constantly cut you off. Out of all the chases, I'd rank this one number 3 out of 4. It's better than Dolly's, but not as good as Jackie's and definitely not as good as Big Top's.
Time for us to say goodbye.
Now that we've reached the end of the main route, let's talk about the route to the secret ending.
Time for us to not say goodbye.
I won't go through every single secret area you need to go through to get the collectibles, because I'm already on page 12 of the script and still in the gameplay section. But I will talk about what's by far the most elaborate route to a collectible, David's Ball. I liked the retail showroom itself, but I feel like it didn't lend well to the stealth gameplay. It seemed like no matter where I was, the mimic immediately spotted me. The idea for the puzzle was cool, but because the room was tedious, I just looked up the door code instead of actually solving it. I think this kind of puzzle would have worked better in a bigger area like the warehouse and the workshop. But even if I hadn't been able to look up the code and had to solve it myself, it probably would have been worth it considering what comes next.
You take the moon!
This was so cool for something that's an optional bonus area. It works thematically too, since the moon suit doesn't seem to have anything to do with the main plot. It's an anomaly on multiple levels. The White Tiger segment taught us that unlike the rest of the factory, the lower basements are not M2's domain, and this one uses that potential just as well. I thought the original moon was creepy, but this guy is on a whole other level. The design is scary on its own, but the voice is what really makes him a chilling threat.
Lay thee down now and rest, may thy slumber be blessed.
What I like about this area is that it's not actually very challenging, but it feels like Moon could spot you at any second. There are so many little holes in the wall and corners that you can just barely see around, so you're constantly paranoid that he'll spot you. And every now and then, he does. I think this is an important balance for horror to have. It can't be hard enough to make you fail over and over, because then you get acclimated to the horror and stop feeling scared. But it should still feel like you could easily fail at any second due to the littlest mistake or oversight. I didn't even notice the color coding of the 4 areas until Design Frame pointed it out in their live stream, so I did a lot of accidental backtracking. That one's on me though, I'm not gonna blame the game for my own stupidity. I'm so thankful this minigame has checkpoints, considering how slow it is. I don't know if this was to keep it era accurate or something, but they really should have let you skip the text when you're done reading it instead of keeping it on a timer. If you're a fast reader like me, then it makes the text adventure a slog, but if you're a slow reader, then it makes you prompt the text a second time in order to finish reading it. Despite that, it's still a nice idea for a hidden route. I like it a lot better than just throwing in more secret 8-bit minigames. Even as early as FNAF 3, I had felt that it had become a crutch rather than a creative addition, but this was something completely new. And tying it to the collectibles was a genius way of giving you an actual in-game reason to go around finding them all. Praise aside, I'm really glad you start out with the glitched permission instead of having to go through this whole thing again and follow up playthroughs. Now it's time to collect the 8 pages, 5 spring lock parts, 6 trash cubes, 5 film reels, 6 audio tapes. Not much to say about that part, since it's the exact same thing as collecting the film reels, except for them being in slightly easier places to reach. So let's just skip ahead, shall we? The bedtime story, the final section of the game. Some might find it dumb that you have to replay the entire game to get this ending just because of a single added collectible. I think it's necessary from a story perspective, which I'll explain in the story segment, which we're finally getting close to at this point. But yeah, from a gameplay perspective, I don't think this segment was worth all the effort of getting to it. It's by far the simplest part of the game. Just press the buttons in the order that's right next to you. This should have been some final test of what you've learned, not a short game of memory with a visible cheat code. It's funny when one of them says something completely fine and then follows it up with, "Oh no."
They ate with glee. Oh no.
Also, did anyone else notice that the tiger plush gets way bigger when we place it on the pedestal? Why is that? Obviously there's no in-universe reason, but from a development perspective, is there a logical explanation for why this would happen? I've always been curious about that. And that's every section of the game. Well, not every section, but the vast majority of them. This may surprise you after all the complaints I had, but I'm giving the gameplay a 6 out of 7. There were a handful of boring moments and a smaller handful of frustrating ones, but overall, I had a really fun time with this game. It's just a lot harder to talk at length about what does work than what doesn't, because a lot of the things that do work are consistent across the board, while most of the things that don't work are unique to specific sections. And most importantly, I think that for the most part, the game was paced perfectly. Almost every time I was about to get bored with a section, I was on to the next. Sections rarely felt too short, but they also rarely overstayed their welcome. That's a big part of what led to me having such an enjoyable experience, despite there being so many parts with a gameplay style I'm not fond of. Normally I would group story and lore together because there's so little actual story that I need lore to compensate, but this time there's a lot to talk about in both camps, so I'll separate them. But first, I should probably explain the difference between the two. Story is the actual main plot being told to us. You know, the events that lead the narrative along. Inciting incidents, rising action, climax, all that good stuff you hopefully learned about in elementary school English class. You know, if they're even still allowed to have English class. I won't actually be ranking the lore, because ultimately it doesn't have much of an effect on the quality of the game, but I'll still talk about it because I know it's a big part of why people clicked on this video in the first place. So, I'm just gonna pretend the books didn't spoil half the major plot points of this game, because it's not fair to judge the game based on the book's mistakes. I've heard people say we don't get enough story in the first half of the game, but I strongly disagree. I think the pacing was perfect. Characters need to be set up properly before anything crazy happens, which is exactly what the first half of this game did. It showed us what this location and the people within it were like before everything came crumbling down, and gave us plenty of hints as to why things would crumble. Unlike the gameplay, which I split into more sections than I care to count, I'm gonna split this into 7. 12 through 5 AM will each be their own, and then the secret bedtime ending and the reveals we get leading up to it will be the last. 12 AM is all about setting up the basic premise. Who we are, why we're here, and what we should be afraid of. That's about all we need at this early stage, and it feels like enough to carry us through what I consider the tutorial segments. It makes it seem like we're in for a typical Five Nights at Freddy's setup. Fazbear Entertainment sent some poor employee to deal with a murderous robot who wants to stuff people into suits. Surely there'll be some lore bait sprinkled in, and that's about it, right?
Nope.
Turns out, throughout the game we're fed a gripping, dramatic tale about this place's long history, the people behind it, and how the monster chasing us came to be. At the very start, Dispatch info dumps some stuff that really wasn't necessary since we learn it later anyway.
From what we can tell,
It was designed to keep Murray's son entertained while Murray worked. It would mimic the actions of those around it. At some point, the endoskeleton was exposed to some sort of violence, the details of which are a little fuzzy.
I kinda think this should have been cut. It almost feels like the story suddenly decided to talk down to us for this one moment. Like it doesn't trust us to listen to the audio tapes or something. Apart from that one moment, this hour is all about establishing Fiona. When we first meet her, she stands in stark contrast to everything else in this place. She genuinely cares about the employees, and she feels sorry that they're forced into a dangerous situation.
And please, bear in mind, if anything does go wrong, we want you to know that it's not your fault.
That's a rare type in these games. It's clear that despite being high up in the company, she's not happy with the way it's set up. Right after that, we get to know about where she got her start. She was an ex-puppeteer who got hired into the company and was recruited by Edwin, who at the time was the son of the company's owner, for the Mrs. Helpful tapes. And as we learn after the Big Top showroom, the two formed a bond that would not be appropriate workplace conduct these days.
Trisha will babysit David while I'm gone. I love you both, and I'll be back next week.
We also get some nice foreshadowing for what we'll learn in the next hour.
I just have this terrible feeling like I need to be there so nothing goes wrong, just in case.
This hour is about how without Fiona, Edwin was completely incompetent and utterly soulless. He has these atrocious and downright immoral ideas, but he sounds so excited about them that you can't help but pity him. We start out by learning how he felt about his greatest and worst invention, the Mimic itself.
Think of it as your new babysitter, but doesn't get paid and go home. It'll stay with us and help around the house.
This is the only tape where we hear David say anything.
Why does it look like that?
I wish there was at least one that was mostly him speaking, because I think there was a lot of missed potential with him. This kid was raised by a robot that his absent dad was convinced was a revived version of his mom. That must have really messed him up. Especially since the few words we do have for him suggest that he may have unknowingly gave M1 the idea to copy Fiona in the first place.
I know what you want better than you do. I am always watching and learning.
I think it's weird that David found M1 scary but had no problem with any of these abominations.
It's scary.
You'd think he'd be desensitized to something as tame as this after spending time in the Storytime showroom. Shortly after that, we get to by far the worst audio tape in the game, the one where Edwin learns that his wife died. I really think they should have gotten another take for this one. This doesn't sound like a man who lost his wife. This sounds like yassified Pinocchio.
Oh, how am I supposed to tell David that his mother is gone? How am I supposed to raise a kid on my own?
Father, when can I leave to be on my own? I've got the whole world to see.
I also kind of feel like this tape and the previous one should have been swapped. This is the one that tells us about what I'd consider to be the inciting incident, Fiona's death. Meanwhile, the one before it told us Edwin's first attempt at a solution. It seems kinda odd to go from the tape foreshadowing Fiona's death to the tape where Edwin tries to make a replacement for her to the tape where Edwin wonders what he should do about her death. See how that kinda breaks the flow of the story a little? They're pretty close together though, so it's not a big deal. The AI Slop TV studio section is where we really start to see how low this man is willing to go.
What about the talent? well, we removed the talent.
He's so desperate to keep this company growing that he forgets his own deceased wife was the very talent he's talking about removing. And that fits so well for someone who literally replaced said wife with a machine. It's funny that the Living Tombstone was 8 years ahead of their time. The Dolly section does a great job reinforcing Edwin's mindset. Edwin brags to his employees about how the Dolly system will allow employees to be laid off. He has such a lack of social awareness that it's astounding.
Just imagine the money we'll save.
Also, it's funny that Edwin takes credit for inventing recycling. Sure, recycling electronics wasn't a thing back then, but he's really trying to say he came up with the word itself.
I am recycling. Edwin Murray coined the term.
Oh boy, 3 a.m.
This hour shows us the natural consequences of the previous hour's ideas. How Edwin's negligence, worker abuse, and overzealousness started to cause the company and what remained of his family to collapse right under his nose. We start with the biggest mistake he ever made, and the most personal one, the playground. It was such an obviously bad idea, but Edwin was so confident that all his ideas are good ideas that even his lawyer couldn't get it through his thick skull that he was endangering his child. I really think this tape should have been placed somewhere else, because I've seen so many people think that either the playground is in this room with the parade floats, or that the parade floats are the playground, which makes Edwin look even dumber than he actually is, which is hard to believe. After that, we get to hear where Edwin's terrible methods actually came from. This tape tells of how Edwin's dad died and the company was passed down to Edwin himself, and it recontextualizes a lot of what we've seen before. Edwin wasn't just some insane guy. He was simply desperate to fill the enormous shoes left for him, and to prove himself to his late father that his inventions are worth investing in.
Maybe rebrand? We could start making some of my inventions for real.
Later on, we get a little reference to this, where Edwin has a picture on his desk of his dad, but it's flipped down, unlike the picture of Fiona next to it. He cares about his dad, but he also has serious issues with him, and this paints his desperation to prove not just his mechanical products, but himself as worthy to clients in a new light.
Amazing, if I do say so myself.
Edwin is a genius.
Shortly after that, we get a series of tapes from after he was proven right that he couldn't fill his dad's shoes.
You stole my work. Now your jackets, purses, and coffee mugs, and anything else belongs to me. Maybe I'll go find someone to sell your stuff to. How does that feel?
I love the pettiness here. It's deserved given that his stuff was stolen, but it's still really funny. Honestly, I'd do the same thing in his situation.
I can't do this alone. The change orders are killing me. My employees, my friends, they keep leaving.
This moment feels like it's supposed to be sad, and it is to an extent, but it's less sad when you remember that Edwin was the one mistreating and firing his employees to begin with. If he had treated the lower level guys with any shred of human dignity and respect, then maybe the admins wouldn't have jumped ship so easily. They couldn't even get a day off to attend a funeral. The tragic irony hits hard, though.
I just need to finish the new Fazbear project, and then everyone will come back. We can get back to normal.
It hurts to hear him still clinging to hope when we know full well how things end for this company, and what Fazbear Entertainment really wants from him. Not the project, but the rights to everything, for the low, low price of $0. It's also a good mask-off moment in comparison to the audio tape from shortly before this. In that, he was putting on a tough front, but in this one he's revealing weakness to the one person he ever felt he could show weakness to, even though he knows she'll probably never hear it. It's a shame how many people skip over this recording and go straight for the door next to it, because it's such a strong little monologue, and the voice acting in it is some of the game's best.
Stop. You're not him. You're not! Stop sounding like him!
The moment the book readers had been waiting for. Edwin beating up a recreation of his son with a metal pipe. It's crazy what being in a fandom will make you cheer for. This is the one other tape where I think the voice acting kinda flops. It's not as bad as the whining one, but the noises Edwin makes when beating up M2 sound like someone play fighting with a balloon animal. On the plus side, the tape was placed in the perfect spot, just before the white tiger section. It's great how the game tends to know the most chilling time to give out certain information. Now we can talk about the bad ending real quick. I like how you immediately know you made the wrong choice by how anticlimactic Dispatch's dialogue is.
A job well done. Head on out, it's over.
I loved the credits sequence here, but it probably shouldn't be here. I was lucky enough to experience the parachute ending before this one, but I know a lot of people were spoiled about the research and development area because they got this ending first. Plus, it kinda spoils the reveal that the voice talking to you is some sort of mimic, but that was kinda obvious already, so that's less of an issue. Still, it's an awesome callback to Help Wanted, and helps reinforce the idea of Glitchtrap being tied to M2. Dispatch's monologue about which suit you'll be stuffed into is really interesting. Even more so if you saw that almost all the corpses were stuffed into the very same suits he lists as options. The one that made it the farthest was a bee, the one who died right at the start was a dog, and 2 were stuffed into jesters. I don't know what the hedgehog represents though. Maybe that guy was a fast runner? It also makes you wonder why M2 chose Fredbear for you in the bad ending. The research and development area twist is kind of a rehash of the pizza place twist from Security Breach, but I can forgive that since it had better build-up than Security Breach's version, and makes way more sense in universe. Most of this area doesn't really add anything new story-wise, it's mostly just built around lore reveals. So let's just skip ahead to the end of it, which genuinely shocked me but made so much sense in hindsight.
You give me no other option. Enter.
At the start of 5 AM, we meet the one who's been pretending to be Dispatch, F10N4, or as we soon learn, M1. I love this character. M1 is so manipulative, and the fact she has good intentions makes it somehow even creepier. She legitimately doesn't know what she's doing wrong, because every choice she makes is the most logical according to the programming she was given. She's supposed to make David happy and help Edwin stay afloat, but Edwin's choices, as well as circumstances beyond anyone's control, made it so those things are impossible for her to do without crossing disturbing ethical lines. And then even after doing everything she was told to do, Edwin still abandoned her. Or at least that's what she thinks. She may be a deranged individual, but she's such a sympathetic one. The film reels finally tie together all the puzzle pieces of Edwin's family drama that were sprinkled throughout the rest of the game up to this point, and it's such a satisfying way of doing so, especially since it matches up with the whole game's aesthetic. They work to hammer in how Edwin's negligence ruined his family, which makes what comes after work even better. The last audio recording is, in my opinion, the best story moment in any piece of Five Nights at Freddy's media. The karma here is so good. Edwin's greatest sin is his neglect, as we've seen over and over throughout the game, and that's thrown right back into his face when his creation neglects him as he dies, using his very own words to mock him. The Mimic even uses specific quotes that harken back to Edwin's worst losses.
Daddy's busy, buddy. Why don't you go outside and play?
This one's a reminder of how David died because Edwin left him outside to play when he should have had someone watching him.
Ask your mom if she's not busy.
This one is a reminder that Fiona is gone, and that he offloaded his responsibilities as a parent onto a copy of her, and that he stripped all physical autonomy from said copy so she can never come to help him. I like how the tiger copies a bunch of lines from this tape as a sort of foreshadowing.
Emergency! Call for help! Please! Call for help!
Although I think a few of them are weird choices.
Note to self, a portable cleaner that gets rid of smoke damage. Better yet, a cleaner valve attachment.
The writing here was so fire it set the whole costume manor ablaze. Okay, but seriously, they really should have made it more visually clear how the fire started. If you don't notice the tiny spark fly towards the barrel, which you probably won't because you're busy trying to hurry to the elevator, it'll seem like the place just randomly decided to spontaneously combust. I and a lot of other people originally thought Cradle.exe was designed to burn the place down, because that's the only thing that changes when we activate the program. There's one thing about the story that I feel like almost everyone misinterprets, so I want to clear it up right here and now. M2 doesn't care about having the Mimic blueprints. That's not why he tracks you down and steals the data diver. If he wanted the blueprints, he would have just stolen the data diver from the first technician sent to the place, gotten the upgrades himself, and accessed the blueprints. Or he could have let the first technician get the blueprints and then killed them immediately after. Also, he doesn't even take the diver part itself, which he'd need in order to display the blueprints on a computer. He just takes the storage part. This makes it pretty clear that he simply doesn't want Fazbear Entertainment to have the blueprints, which is fair, given at this point they would pretty much belong to him. Plus, he likes to mimic Edwin, who outright said,
"Someone told them about M2. Well, they can't have it."
I think this would have been communicated better if M2 had, stomped it to bits or something instead of taking off with it. I can see why people got the idea, even if it makes no sense. But regardless, the fact that either ending leads to you dying in your van at the Mimic's hand makes him feel so threatening. Once he's got his sights on you, it doesn't matter what you do, you can't run from him. Even after burning his home down with him inside, all we did was make him angrier and prevent ourselves from getting a quick, merciful death. So that's the main story, which, if you couldn't tell, I loved. It's such a fresh turn for a franchise that's relied on jumbling up an incredibly simple story to the point it looks complex to those who don't know better. But it doesn't end there, because there's still the secret ending, and all the extra goodies you'll find while backtracking to get it. There are two backtracking moments in particular that are especially rich from a story standpoint: the product ads and the executive helpful messages. The product ads are a fun way of showing how Edwin came up with the Mimic. Each one contains an aspect of it, which makes the Mimic really feel like his ultimate achievement. I also like how the Cleanovac is the only one that didn't fail miserably. I just know Steelwool couldn't find it in their hearts to have there be anything wrong with these little guys. Two of the three helpful messages are nothing special, just stuff we already know about. But the proposal one is easily my favorite piece of optional story. I was so happy to get a good look at what Edwin and Fiona's relationship was like at the start. You'd think it would be creepy, with Edwin becoming the owner of the place and Fiona still being an employee, but this tape really makes it feel like they're on equal footing.
You're the most amazing artist and creator I've ever been lucky enough to employ.
The way Edwin hesitates before calling Fiona someone he employed shows how it's hard for him to even think of her as anything but an equal.
Not a lot of things really make me happy, but you do.
It's something I never even processed before he said it, but it was so clearly true. Whenever he's talking to himself or his employees, he's this cranky, miserable guy. And when he's talking to investors, he's got the whole showman persona. But when Fiona's around, we always see a more vulnerable and, real side of him. Moon.exe has a lot for you to dig into. It's very symbolic, so it's hard to talk about objectively, but it has interesting implications about Edwin, M1, M2, and also David through M2. It took me until writing this script to fully understand how well the secret route works from a story perspective. It didn't register that the game creates the David code for M2 because we scanned all of David's belongings into the game. We're basically putting tons of David's memories together for M2 to experience in an instant. M1 even feeds those memories into the text, with descriptions of what certain items meant to David. This definitely feels worth the effort story-wise. Putting in the extra work to get an ending with closure, even if it's probably not the true ending, is totally satisfying. And even then, it's bittersweet in a way that really hits hard. Seeing M2 lay in bed at peace, but still a shallow copy of someone being comforted by even shallower copies of his parents, is just so... I don't even know. It just works. It works so well with the theme of the game. Trying to recreate what once existed, but having it be soulless and hollow. It's a type of narrative Scott's been trying to pull off since The Silver Eyes, nearly 10 whole years ago, and I think he's finally perfected the story he's always wanted to tell. Needless to say, the story gets a 2 out of 2, easily. This is by far the best story in a Five Nights at Freddy's game. This is just going to be a little short speedrun of a segment because lore tends to be full of theories and speculation, and I don't want to judge the game based on anything that ends up not being true. So, personally, I think this game greatly strengthened the lore of the universe and recontextualized other games wonderfully. I know that's a highly divisive opinion, but based on my own observation, I think a lot of people are simply upset that personal headcanons they mistook for established plot points were contradicted. Here's one example. People say it's weird that this game tells us Edwin invented springlock suits, when it was previously established that Henry invented them, but I object to that on 2 levels. 1, it's never said in the game that Edwin invented them, and 2, it's never said anywhere that Henry invented them. I actually looked up every instance of the phrase springlock in all 3 novels, and never once does anyone claim that Henry was the first person to create springlock suits. Speaking of Henry, I thought it was hilarious that it took until now for so many people to realize he isn't a good person, and a lot of them think this is like tarnishing Henry's character. He did that himself when he did nothing for 40 years, then created a device to capture his daughter and electrocute her into complacency, and sent her and 3 other murderous animatronics after someone in a vent with only a flashlight as defense, while he sat in a big cozy room with impenetrable steel doors. Oh, and set that someone on fire because of a hunch that they're suicidal. There were so many little touches that really brought the world to life. Things like the origins of Stan's budget tech and the mediocre melodies, the source of the tech for the pirate rides in Phaser Blast. Just things that didn't need an explanation, but that make the FNAF universe feel ever so slightly more real by being there. One thing the game does that I think was a downright necessary move is that it establishes FNAF as a retro-futuristic universe, where things basically follow the technological rules of what fictional 70s and 80s media presented when it wanted to show futuristic tech instead of being accurate to the actual time period. Take F10N4 for example, which Sealwolf said was inspired by war games from 1983. I understand this isn't something a lot of people wanted for the FNAF universe, myself included, but it's been that way for a long time, and I think working that into the broader world is a much better idea than just having Fazbear Entertainment randomly be decades ahead of everyone else for seemingly no reason. It establishes a clear baseline for where our suspension of disbelief should be, something we really needed for a long time. Apart from the original Freddy's and maybe the FNAF 4 house, this is the creepiest location we've seen so far in my opinion. It's a total 180 from Security Breach and even Ruin. There are a lot of rookie mistakes in regards to the environments, both with visuals and audio, but they're not game-breaking. I've seen some channels act like these mistakes are downright insulting to anyone who buys the game, but come on. It's not the end of the world, and it's not something worth taking offense to. Except that mansion part. That was offensively buggy. The creepiness is, of course, in large part due to the costumes in every nook and cranny of the place. Obviously, I can't talk about every costume, because there are dozens, but I'll go through the ones that stuck out the most to me. My favorite suit is the elephant. I'm not sure why, it just scratches that itch for me. It's a nice blend of creepy and cute, with the framing pushing it more towards one or the other. Moon has to be the scariest suit, although Jackie is a close second. I've already discussed both of them before though. Chica was a particularly creative one. The roller disco theme made her a lot more interesting than one would expect from a Chica suit. I wasn't big on Tiger when we saw him in Help Wanted 2 and the game's trailer, but after seeing him in-game, I think he works. The twisted, inhuman poses they put him in tend to distract from his comedically enormous head. The skinless suits are a brilliant idea. They take the already unsettling designs and make them so much worse. They make the characters feel even more dead than they already did, and the lack of any added details draws more attention to their twisted expressions. Look at the Mycelium Man, for example. The regular one is this goofy guy who's a little creepy at certain angles, but then the unfinished one is nightmare fuel. There are only 2 designs in the entire game that I find disappointing. First is the Jester. For someone who was so important in the books and who has such creepy concept art, the final design is horribly underwhelming. And the second is the Prototype. Fan artists have played around with the concept of all the animatronics being stitched together since the salvage theory, and I've seen so many that pulled it off better than this. It's not even Steel Wool's first time screwing it up. I guess they wanted a redo, but they still couldn't get it quite right. It feels way too aimless, like they didn't think about how the parts would work together aesthetically. I guess that's probably the point, but it doesn't make for a good design. I do like the cupcake shoulder, though. It reminds me of Twisted Chica. I hope we get an MCM mascot-style Freddy at some point. We have Glitch Trap, Party Time Chica, and First Mate Foxy, but nothing for the main bear himself costume-wise, only animatronics. The last thing I want to talk about is the sound design. The ambience is hit or miss. Some sections, like the Tiger Basement, do a phenomenal job, while others are either underwhelming or, as I said before, completely broken. One area where I think the sound was detrimental to the horror is the warehouse. Occasionally the music would bug out and stop playing, and suddenly the area was a lot scarier. I don't think the music needs to be cut entirely, but maybe have it play for just a moment when Chica spawns and then stop. Long story short, more of this please. Then there are the sounds the characters themselves make. The Mimic makes the creepiest sounds when he's in the mascot costumes. They're supposed to be mechanical noises, but they sound like an eldritch abomination. A lot of the boss characters talk too much though, in my opinion. I think they should only speak when they spot you, so that it's something that actually triggers fear, instead of getting really tiring really fast. I don't need to hear and surprise every 2 seconds when he hasn't found me, and I'm not surprised. The only exception is Moon. His singing makes him way scarier, as I've said before. Maybe I'd change my mind about the voice lines if other characters were more like him, and less like, "You're not allowed back here." Some issues aside, I'm still giving the game the point for atmosphere. It's definitely more good than bad. One look at the place will tell you that. So, after all that, after going through the gameplay, the story, and the atmosphere, our final score is 9 out of 10. Exactly the same score I gave Sister Location Custom Night in my ranking video, which ended up being in first place. But I can't just leave it as a tie, that would be boring. So which one's better? That's such a hard question to answer. The story and atmosphere are definitely better in Secret of the Mimic, but the gameplay is where it gets tough. Part of me wants to say Sister Location Custom Night, because it's the perfection of the FNAF gameplay formula, but another part of me wants to say Secret of the Mimic, because there's so much more, game to it. I feel like Secret of the Mimic has higher highs and lower lows. The way I ultimately answered this question was by asking myself, if I had to recommend one of the two to someone, which one would I choose? And my answer to that was immediately Secret of the Mimic, of course. But that being said, I'd tell them to wait until it goes on sale. If it's $20 or so, then it's definitely worth it, but there isn't nearly enough quality content to justify the $40 price tag, just like every other Steel Wool game. Now, building off of that, I'm sure people are gonna ask, how could this be the best FNAF game if you have so much criticism to give? Well, you might not like the answer to that. I think that gameplay-wise, most FNAF games are just, not good. Like, at all. They're usually held up entirely by the story, which tends to be more just interesting than it is high quality. In my ranking video, I was giving the game's ratings adjusted for FNAF standards, like a bell curve. If you took that away, almost all of them would be 5 out of 10 or lower. Even this game, which I gave a 9 out of 10 on my FNAF scale, would get more like a 7 out of 10 on a normal scale, which is still good, hence why I think it's the best FNAF game. I think even the fact I gave so much in-depth criticism is ironically a sign of how much I liked the game. I've never gone into this much detail on any FNAF game, or any game in general, before. Clearly I must like it a lot in order to do that, given how I spent like an hour and a half talking about this game compared to 2 hours talking about every other game combined. Oh, and if you're wondering what my updated list would look like, including both this game and Into the Pit, I'll be working on a video about that later. I would just put it here, but some of them got shifted around a bit upon reevaluation, so I want to make a video explaining those changes if people are interested. So if you are, please let me know.